All right, so in this week's lesson, we're going to talk about chords that can be played on top of each other or stacked on top of each other to get a whole different sound. And this is something that I didn't realize for years. When I would see a C chord, for example, in a chord chart, I would just do that. I thought that's what a C chord was. But there's other things I can play. There's other minor triads I can play on top of that major C chord to give it a whole different sound. Some of those sound dreamy and some of them sound a little more bluesy. And we're going to talk through those and show you how you can work them into your rhythm playing and into your lead playing. And at the end of this, there's a great little melody practice exercise that pulls it all together and allows you to practice everything we're going to talk through. So I've got the lesson split into two parts. In this video, we're going to go through all of the theory stuff. I'm going to explain it, break it all down. If you'd like to get into that practice exercise and also get the tablature for that and the on-screen tab viewer, you can get those things by going to activemelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page and do a search for EP411. All right, so before we jump right into stacking chords on top of each other, I know that can be confusing to some of you out there. I think there's an easier way to ease into this topic, and we're going to start with a chord that we're all familiar with, which is the C chord, and we're going to make one note change, and that one note change is going to lead us into a minor triad. It's all going to make sense as we break this down. But that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be looking at everything over a C chord. That makes it easy. One chord to worry about. And so if you know a C chord, you're already at least at the starting gate for how to do this. Okay, so this is the C chord that we're all familiar with down in first position. But we're going to slide it all the way up to here. And that's playing that same C chord, but using our E shape out of cage. So these three fingers are playing the E shape that you'd play down here, first position. Or we're playing it up here. So hopefully you at least follow me that far. Now we're only going to look at the top three strings of that chord. For now, that's all we really need to focus on, just to get this concept down. That's a C chord, a C triad, and it's the top part of your major bar chord. But look what happens if I take the C and I go down one fret, down to this note, but I leave the other two fingers where they were. I get a whole different vibe. Now I'm going to add my pinky down here to the 10th fret 4th string. And I'm playing a dreamy sounding chord. Now that's a C major 7 chord. So to get into this, we're going to start with this triad. That's just our C chord. And if you look at the C note itself, which is our 1, so think of the major scale. So when I talk about these numbers come from the major scale. So if we look at the C major scale here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we go up 1 to the 1. So this is the relationship that creates that C major 7 sound. It's taking your 1 and just flatting the 1. That's one way to think of it. That gets you into this kind of dreamy sounding C chord. And so that's all a C major 7 chord is taking your 1 and flatting it, but then playing the other notes of the chord. So that means anywhere that I can play a C chord, so if I'm playing a C down here using the A shape, for example, I look at where my C note is. In this case, it would be on the 3rd string, and I just go down 1, but I play the other notes, right? So a C major 7 chord would sound like this if I'm playing it out of the A position. And then up here, I've got this sound, or I can go like this, or I can come down to my C chord in first position and lift my index finger, because I'm going from the C down a half step to the B, right? So that's that C major 7 sound, or the major 7 sound, I should say. And the real value to me is getting that sound in your head, this sound. Because this chord works anytime you're playing a C chord, you can play a C major 7 chord on top of it. Now, this is where I'm going to talk about stacking chords, as I mentioned. If we look at this triad that was created here, if you hear it in context with the C, it sounds like that. But if I hear it in context with an E, listen to this. It has a whole different feel. It sounds much more sad. So in actual fact, this triad is an E minor triad. And so here's how we're going to summarize this. Within a C major 7 chord is the C chord and an E minor chord. The two chords are together. So this means anytime I'm jamming with other people or looking at a chord chart and it calls for a C chord, I can play an E minor triad on top of it to get that C major 7 sound. The question is, when would you do it? And that depends on when you hear that sound in your head, that dreamy sound. So obviously if you hear some real driving, rock, blues kind of thing in the key of C, to work in the dreamy sound, I don't know that that's going to work. It might work, but you just have to get that tone in your head and see and let your ear sort of tell you if that's a good choice or not. But if it's a real slow song like this, where we've got this thing going on, working that in sounds great. All right, so let me put on a loop of me just strumming a C chord like this. And I'll play this major 7 sound on top of it so you can get some ideas for how you might use it. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start off and play the C major triad. And then watch this. There's that E minor triad that's played on top of the C chord. And you can slide into it and get a real dreamy sound. And then work it into your lead as well. And so all I'm doing to work it into my lead is trying to hit that note. So watch this if I'm playing. Now that's in the C major scale, but I'm focusing on that 7th interval. And then you can do it up here. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, that you can play that E minor triad on top of your C major chord to get a C major 7 sound. So now let's talk about another thing that we can play on top of our C chord. We can also play a C dominant 7 chord on top of it. Now, a lot of people get confused between a dominant 7 and a major 7. The dominant 7, by the way, if you're looking at a chord chart, that's where it'll just say like C7. It won't say C major 7, like for major 7. It'll just be a C7. That's a dominant 7 chord. And the difference between a major 7 chord and a dominant 7 chord is that the dominant 7, you just take that major 7 sound. So you take the major 7 and you flat it again. So it's a flatted 7 basically. So in the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we flat the 7. If you work that note into your chord, you have a C7, a C dominant 7. And you can play a dominant 7 chord on top of your major chord anywhere you see it. It's just going to pull that chord into a much more tense kind of sound. And to find your dominant 7 chords all over the neck, all you have to do is, if you know your main chord, your major chord, in this case obviously we're playing a C, if you go down, you can keep these 2 strings the same. That's your 3rd and your 5th interval. 3rd, 5th. There's your flatted 1, right? So that's your major 7. If you go down another one, there's your dominant 7. So you just go down 2 from wherever your 1 is to get to that dominant 7 sound. And you can work that note into your lead. So if I'm playing a lead and I can work in that note, that's what is meant when somebody says add in the 7 into your sound, is just adding that note, that 7th interval. But what they mean actually is the flatted 7. So that sound, it just gives it much more of a bluesy sound. And anytime you want to blues things up a little bit, it works especially well if you're about to go into a 4 chord or about to switch chords, is to play that dominant 7 chord and then release the tension. So you're creating a tension that wasn't there and releasing it to the next chord. In that case, it was the F chord. But that's what that dominant 7 sound is. Let me strum along with the C chord again and put it in context so you can hear what it sounds like on top of just a regular C chord. All right, so we're going to start off by playing a C triad. And then let's go into the C major 7. We've already covered that one. Right? Now I'm going to go down to that flat 7. There's the dominant 7, C dominant 7. Hear how that works on top of the C chord. Even though it's just a C chord in the background, I can play this dominant 7. And it fits right on top of it very nicely. It colors that chord. Now I can work it into my lead as well. That single note, that's the 7, the flatted 7. There it is again, right? All right, so now we're going to take a look at 2 more minor triads that we can play on top of a major chord to pull it in different directions. And this will also have kind of a dreamy sound and a bluesy sound. And I'm talking about the 6 chord and the 9 chord. So we're going to still be playing over C, and I'm going to show you how you can play a minor chord to get a C6 sound, which is a classic Western swing. That sound. And then you move that down 2 frets into your C9 sound, which gives you much more of a bluesy sound. But both of those situations are reliant on a minor triad to be played on top of your C major chord. So if there's a C chord, somebody's strumming a C chord in a band or another guitar player or whatever, you can play the A minor triad on top of that C chord to get the C6 sound. That's all a 6 chord is. It's your relative minor chord that's played on top of that major chord. So that's the big takeaway on that topic, is if you're playing a C chord and you want to play that, get that C6 sound, you have to ask yourself, what is the relative minor of your C chord? And you can either use the circle of fifths, and I'll actually put that lesson up, that lesson number up on the screen right now, where I talk about how easy it is to find your relative minor using the circle. Or another way to do that is whatever your root note is. So we're talking about a C. So there's our C note on the 6th string. You just go down 1, 2, 3 frets. Whatever note that is, that's your relative minor. So that's another way to do it if you're just using your fretboard. And so in that case, I went down to an A. So I'd play an A minor triad. But if I play that on top of a C, I get that really dreamy kind of, it doesn't resolve, but it doesn't sound tense either. So a technique that's used often is to slide into it. And you would hear that from the old like Hawaiian lap steel sound that was really popular in the 20s and 30s and led itself into to Western swing. And those lap steels are tuned to an open C6 chord. So if you just strum an open chord and you have it tuned in that way, you're playing a C6. And obviously when you're using a slide, you can play your 1 chord, your 4 chord, your 5 chord with that 6 sound. Now the thing that's really cool to me about the 6 chord is if I go down 2 frets, so in this case, I'd be going from the A minor down to a G minor, and I play that on top of the C chord, I'm getting a 9 chord sound. So I'm playing a C9 chord, which is a very bluesy chord. I use that for the 4 chord and the 5 chord all the time in a 1-4-5 blues. And so that's your 6 sound. So there's your C6. And then you slide that down 2 frets and you get the C9. And so that's true all over the fretboard. So anywhere I'm playing an A minor, I go down 2 frets and I've got the 9 chord. Even up here, I could go down 2 frets and I'm playing a C9 chord. And so I don't think of it necessarily in terms of chord names like the G minor or the A minor. I just think of the relative minor of whatever chord I'm on. And I kind of know them off of chord shapes as well. So if I'm looking at the A chord shape right here, for example, and I'm playing a C chord, you can see where my fingers are. They're on frets 3 and 5. I just look at the top part of those frets. There's fret 5 and there's fret 3. That's my 6 chord and that's my 9 chord off of this shape. So it makes it very easy for me to find. And that's how I think of it. I'm not really thinking about chord names per se. I'm just thinking about shapes more or less. It's just the way my brain works. I know we're all a little different on that. But let me play along with the jam track and just put the C6 and the C9 into perspective so that you can hear what they sound like over just a plain old C chord. All right, so here we go with the C6. This is one of my favorites. I love this sound. Listen to this. So there's our C chord. Here it is. So Western swing sound. It's just awesome. And all I have to do is remember to play the relative minor triad. Wherever it can play it. It can play it here. And that's the C6 sound. Now if I go down 2 frets from there, I'm playing the C9. See how bluesy it went? It goes from dreamy down to bluesy. And you can work it down chromatically like that. So much use out of that one technique right there. All right, so those are 4 chords that you can play on top of a major chord to color that chord in a different way. Some are dreamy, some are more bluesy. And to put all of this into a practice exercise, I wrote a little composition. We're going to be doing that in the key of C, since that's the key we're talking about. But there's 3 chords in it. There's the C chord, there's an F chord, and then there's a G chord. So we're going to be playing over the chord changes. So as the C chord is passing by in the song, we're going to be doing elements of this, the C6, the C9, the C major 7. When it goes to the F chord, then we're going to be playing the F6, the F9, and so forth. Same with the G chord. I thought that would be a really good way to practice all of this and put it into kind of a real world example. So I'm going to wrap this video up with me playing a melody using everything that we just talked about. And if you're a premium member, you can download the tablature and have access to the MP3 jam track to practice everything. And then also the part 2 video where I'll just go through the explanation of everything that's going on in that melody. All right, we'll play this and then I'll see you in part 2.